Good morning. Today we look at Isaiah 17, 18, and 19. And again, Isaiah is prophesying more or less against some different countries or nations. The Damascus in chapter 17, Ethiopia in chapter 18, and then Egypt in chapter 19. And these three nations, there's a lot of different nations over the course of history that have conquered Israel or been antagonistic toward Israel. And for Damascus, this is more or less a city, Damascus, I believe, but Damascus will cease to be a city, will become a heap of ruins. Her towns will be destroyed forever. So, Damascus isn't just one town, but it's a major city with some surrounding areas. Kind of in the New Testament, they would talk about the Decapolis. That was an area of 10 towns, Deca, meaning 10. But, so this is, Damascus was there was an alliance of towns. And this was, I think, pretty often common, that, one town or one country is just like today, we have, maybe I should say like in World War I and II, we had the Allies, and, people, communities that work together. And it's kind of like our counties and our state and our nation, our states as well. But, the different communities coming together. But Damascus is going to be nothing. There's going to be decimated. Her towns will be deserted forever. There will be places for flocks which will lie down and no one will make them afraid. So here, where this huge city is, this powerful city, it's going to be pasture land for the sheep. That's what there's going to be left. Nothing left of the city at all. The fortress will disappear and the kingdom will from Damascus. The remnant of Aram will be like the glory of the children of Israel. Just as, a small number will be all that will be left. And then, starting at verse 4, on that day, the glory of Jacob will be brought low. The fat of his flesh will grow lean. It's just, there's not going to be much left. The people of Israel, this is the glory of Jacob, are his descendants, the Jewish people. And, there's going to be nothing left. It says, but it will be as when the reapers gather grain in their arms after the harvest, and then they glean the ears of the grain, the gleanings will be left. And this was something they were always supposed to leave some. And in here too, it talks about, like shaking the olive tree, in the next verse or two. You shake the branches and there are some left. And we've got apple trees in our yard, and some of them are so high, we can't reach them all, even with a lift and different things to get at them. But so there are some left, and over the course of the winter, they fall to the ground and the deer eat them, or they're eaten by the birds, and there's some left to take care of the nature and everything. And this is, God is, through Isaiah, is saying, this is kind of what's going to be with my people Israel. There's not going to be very many left, but there will be enough, that there will be enough. In verse 7, on that day, the people will regard their Maker. Their eyes will look to the Holy One of Israel. They will not have regard for the altars and the work of their hands, and their, on that day, the strong cities will be like, the deserted places of the Hivites and Amorites, which they deserted because of the children of Israel. And there will be desolation. So the remnant of Israel will again come into prominence and power. This is a promise. But it's, this is all coming about, in the future, because verse 10, for you have forgotten the God of your salvation. You have not remembered. So it's an oracle against Damascus. It's an oracle against the people there. It's against the Jewish people. And it's, you have forgotten who God is. And I think about that in the world today, how we've gotten so far from God. And, it's just, it really bothers me that there are so many people that just have no regard for God, no time for God. And you know, he's just an afterthought. You know, they're so busy with everything else in life. And it just, you know, we need to remember, and we need to teach, and we need to encourage people in their faith. And, you know, it goes on, the thunder of many people, the thunder of lightning, see the roar of the nations roar, but he will rebuke them, and they, you know, and he's going to flee far from them. You know, and he's, you know, they've been neglecting him so far, forgotten him for so long that, you know, he's just, you know, he's going to kind of turn a deaf ear for a time. And then chapter 18, woe to the land of the whirling wings beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, sending ambassadors, and, you know, and again, it's all you inhabitants of the world who live on the earth. When a signal is raised to mountains, look, for thus says the Lord. You know, and it's again, you know, the Lord is there, reigning supreme and watching over. But, you know, so this is, it's Egypt and Ethiopia are going to form an alliance against the Assyrians, and they're going to come together that way, and there will be, you know, so that there's this warning, you know, verse 7, at that time gifts will be brought to the Lord of hosts from a people tall and smooth. Who are these people that are tall and smooth? You know, people feared near and far, a nation mighty, whose land the river dividers to Mount Zion. You know, so some foreigners are going to come and worship God. You know, it's just, you know, who are these people? But, and then chapter 19 is an oracle against, or concerning Egypt, not necessarily against, but it's so, see, the Lord is riding on a swift cloud and comes to Egypt. The idols of Egypt will tremble at his presence. You know, all of these idols, the Assyrian poles, and we heard reference a lot of times to the Assyrian poles, and, you know, back in Kings and Chronicles in those history books. But they were, you know, poles raised up, and they worshipped them. And it was, you know, kind of like, you know, when the serpents came and were biting the people of Israel, and they were dying, and they came to Moses, and God said, well, make a pole and put a figure of a serpent on it and raise it up. Well, the people were, you know, they'd look up at the pole, and they were healed. And so they began to worship the pole. And so this was a part of where the Assyrian poles, I think, came, you know, that this was, you know, worshipped that way. And so then, well, you can't have that, because we are to worship the Lord our God and him only. And then, verse 4, I will deliver the Egyptians into the hand of a hard master. A fierce king will take rule over them. So Egypt, even though it's been a place of prominence, is going to be defeated. And in verse 5, this is a part of it. The waters of the Nile will dry up. The river will be parched. The canals will become foul. The branches of the Egypt's Nile will diminish and dry up. Reeds will rot, and, you know, natural catastrophe and natural disasters. And, you know, and we've seen that in our country here lately. Just think of all of the damage from the hurricane, and how many lives have been uprooted, and how much infrastructure is destroyed by these natural disasters. And this is what God is saying is going to happen to Egypt. And it's a reminder too, I think, of, you know, what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah. You know, when you continually work, or maybe not work against God, but ignore God, ignore his word, and all of that, you know, God isn't going to give you blessings, you know, and you know, so these things are wake-up calls for the people of Israel, for the people of Egypt, for all of the people. It's a wake-up call to come back, you know, to God. There will be bare places by the Nile in chapter 7. Then verse 11, the princes of Zoe are utterly foolish. The wise counselors give you stupid counsel. So he's kind of poking fun at all of this perceived wisdom that, you know, there's just not there. And it's, you know, as it goes on, you know, in verse 16, on that day the Egyptians will tremble with fear before the hand of the Lord. And on that day there will be 5 cities in the land of Egypt to speak the language of Canaan. You know, so foreigners, again, are going to come and rule. And the very last verse, on that day, Israel will be the third with Egypt and Assyria. So there, there's going to be a working relationship. And, it says, blessed be Egypt, my people, and Assyria, the work of my hands, and Israel, my heritage. So God is speaking a blessing for these areas, calling them back to faith and to trust in God. And there's so much to all of this, and so many. And I don't understand it all real well. I don't know all of the histories and everything. I just don't concentrate that much on it. My faith is based on Jesus Christ, and that He's. But we still need to remember the laws of God and how God continually calls His people back in so many different manners. He calls His people back, and He always remembers. He always remembers His people.